Now.
Good evening. Good evening. This is Councilwoman Rhashonna C. Cosby here in the city of Linden, and we are live actually tonight on a scheduled community meeting. This community meeting, however, we didn't have multiple guests from the community. I'm just going to give a few updates so that everybody knows what's happening, but we wanted to focus primarily this evening on the legalization referendum that was passed in November's election. So we do have guests that'll speak to that. But before I start, I want to just give an update. Last night was our council meeting. So I want to acknowledge my neighbor and yours, Mrs. Jan Sudnick, as the 5th Ward 2020 Good Neighbor of the Year. And I want to thank her sincerely for her diligence in looking out for the board to ensure that we maintain the quality of life that we are used to here in the 5th Ward. I wanted to remind everyone that, tonight is the last meeting of the year. However, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, I will be probably giving updates on a weekly basis on Thursday evenings at 7 o'clock. So that's something that you can look forward to instead of just a monthly council meeting. And of course, we are still going to be virtual, right? So in the 5th Ward, we recently had our trees planted. If you want a tree planted in the spring, please email me at rcosby@linden-nj.org and we'll send that to the Shade Tree Commission. We have seen construction on St. George's Avenue. They're doing curb and safety improvements. And I'm pleased to announce that that definitely includes the stoplight, which is in front of the plaza. Unfortunately, we had a loss of life there. 4 individuals lost their life in years past. So I've been working really hard to get this light to turn red when people push. And so it's going to be constructed. It was approved for this project. I want to say that tonight's storm is a nor'easter and the governor has already called for a state of emergency. So I want just to encourage everyone to sit back, snuggle up, and be safe. Also, in the 5th Ward, I want to remind you that on the no parking streets, we have our emergency snow routes here in the 5th Ward. If your car is parked there for any amount of time during this snow, it will be towed. There's no excuses for that. The police chief, they want to make sure that our roads are safe for passage. So Chandler Avenue, Park Avenue, Cranford Avenue, and I put a couple of extra streets in there, but they're really not on the list. We also have Elizabeth Avenue and St. George's Avenue in our ward. So please be guided accordingly. Also, the alternate side of the street parking rules have not been suspended. So please, pay attention to the signs. And if you have a neighbor who has a driveway with space, ask if you can buddy up and park there. This way, when the snow is cleared, we all have ample parking on our streets. I don't have anything else to update. I do want to let everyone know that the flu shots are still available through the health department. There's going to be a flu vaccine on the 19th. If you have any desire to get a flu vaccine for free, contact the Linden Health Department. Also, there are some winter recreation programs that are being done virtually. And if you want to get that information, just visit the city website at linden-nj.gov. No, not hyphen. Linden-nj.gov is the new website for the city of Linden. And without any further ado, I wanted to say we had invited for tonight's meeting our senator, who is a resident of Linden, Senator Nicholas Scutari, and he is the senator for LD 2020, which is our district. We invited our Mayor Derek Armstead, who, is the CEO of our city, to discuss the legal marijuana. We also invited our police chief, Dave Hart, to talk about some topics, related to the legalization of marijuana. All right. And we have in the waiting room, a member or a representative from Senator Scutari's office. So we're going to ask him to come in and join us. Harris.
Councilwoman, hi.
Hi, thanks for being here. Just please introduce yourself so everyone knows who you are. I know you. You're awesome. But let everybody know.
So first off, I want to send an apology from Senator Scutari. He was called into last-minute round of negotiations for a possible new aid package, which will certainly help LD22 in a huge way. But I don't want to get ahead of myself because it's still a negotiation, so we don't know. But I do want to send his apologies and a little bit about myself. I'm the Director of Legislation and Policy for Senator Scuteri. We've been the prime sponsor of the legalization of marijuana effort since about 2005, and we're finally here. And we very much appreciate Councilwoman Cosby for inviting the senator on. And I'm sorry you got the B team. So
you're fine.
Thank you.
You're fine. So let's just get into it. Let me just confess that I did read the last version of the bill. What is it called? A21
or
A21. S21. It was a lot. So as my job as the representative from my community, I take it seriously. So I want to tell you that I did read all of the pages. And I want you to write this down. Page 187 and 188 were very, 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 very confusing. It didn't seem like it was related at all to the legalization of marijuana. It seemed that it was different, but I might just be confused, right? Okay. So let's just ask a couple of questions. I had a few questions. I've been following it, and let me just see. I think the police chief, is here in the waiting room, so that's awesome. You know what? Before I start asking my questions, I'll introduce the chief because he may want to weigh in one way or another on some of the questions that I asked you and vice versa. So we're going to welcome David Hart, our police chief from the city of Linden, to join us. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Councilwoman. Good evening, Harris. Thank you for the invitation.
How are you, Chief?
Very good. Monitoring the storm. We're doing well so far.
Thank you for all you.
Glad. I was hopeful. Yeah. The mayor's trying to join us now, so that's a good thing too. One moment. I'm sorry. All right. So I was just going to ask some questions to the office of the senator, chief, and if you have any thing to add, feel free. But Harris, let me just say, I think I opened up the wrong questions. One moment. This is my first time doing this on this platform, so bear with me. My producer's doing all the heavy lifting, and I'm just here trying to ask the questions. So my thing is slow. But anyway, one of the questions that I did have that I know people may not understand, or it was just interesting to me. My question was, on the legislation, it talks about the 5 commissioners that are going to be appointed to the commission. But one of the questions I had was, what is the purpose of having one member of the commission be a state representative of a national organization?
Sure. So first off, we define what a national organization is, and that's a organization such as Minorities for Medical Marijuana, any physicians organization, or any organization that has experience in dealing with the cannabis or marijuana sphere. So it was an effort to bring some real world expertise onto the commission, because in the state, there really isn't much legal dealing. There isn't any legal dealing with marijuana or cannabis except for the medical area. So we wanted to bring somebody in onto the commission who has that know-how, who has that ability to help make decisions as a commissioner, and help inform the other members of the commission, seeing that they have the experience in the area of marijuana.
Okay. Has the commissioners been identified yet?
So not the whole commission. Right now, there's only 2 names that have, so 2 commissioners as well as the executive director of the commission have been named. Senate President Sweeney named Commissioner, I believe her name is Commissioner Nash. She's from his area of the woods, so South Jersey, and the governor named the chair, who's a former counsel of his and an ACLU attorney. Her name is Diana Honenu. She's had years of experience in the cannabis area, but from the social justice from the social justice area, not so much from the clinical area. And then he named Assistant Health Commissioner Jeffrey Brown as the executive director, and Commissioner Brown, or now Director Brown. He's now going to lead the commission's day to day, seeing that he's had the experience as the commissioner in charge of medical marijuana. He was the best, most qualified person to lead it from an operational end.
Thank you. That's good information, because I was so confused. But all right, so as I'm going through the bill, I was also curious as to why the requirement that the cannabis businesses, with the exception, I think, was micro businesses, why was it mandated that they have labor peace agreements, or that the conditions that they have a collective bargaining agreement within 200 days of certification? What was that about?
So it was. I think it was for a few reasons. First and foremost, we want to, especially with labor peace agreements, we want employees to have the ability to organize. I mean, that's very important. And a collective bargaining agreement, especially as a form of a conditional license. A conditional license is essentially a gamble. We're giving you a license on these conditions, and one of those conditions is to make sure you can retain employees. And that's the reason why that we're looking for a labor peace agreement and a CBA, or collective bargaining agreement, within 200 days to ensure the viability of your business.
But there is a law that says that employees do not have to join a union if they don't want to.
And that's why we're talking about labor peace agreements, because a labor peace agreement is the option of joining a union. That the employees can vote not to. It is well within their rights to do so. I mean, we don't want to completely shut the door on employees that want to organize, which is why we were looking at the labor peace agreements.
Okay, because it says that's how they're going to rate the applications. I just thought that was interesting. Thank you for that response. All right, so I have another question. In the bill, there's language that minorities, women, and disabled veterans will be encouraged, even sought after, to start businesses and or micro businesses. But there's also a stipulation whereby a person or entity holding any of the licenses employs a handler, and I'm going to quote here, shall not be eligible for state or local economic incentives. Can you explain that?
So you kind of broke up a little.
You think about it, these folks would need incentives, would they not?
So you kind of broke up in a little bit from what
I was asking, where did you hear? What was thing?
I missed the part about the handlers, but I think I got most of your question, and the answer is
if they employ a handler.
Thank you. So the answer is it's not that they're disallowed from receiving any type of incentive, because I can say that the senator has a bill that's going to be introduced once we legalize, or once we vote on Thursday, that's going to explicitly create grant programs targeted for applicants that are of women, disabled veterans. We have a bill in the works that's going to be drafted explicitly to aid those applicants. What the bill is basically saying is, if your application is being scored as an application in that avenue, you can't get other avenues to score. You're going to be scored as that type of applicant, which clears a lane for people in that avenue to get into the industry. If that's making sense.
It makes sense, because that's important. Like I'm not trying to be funny, but I think the mayor of Newark said it best. He was like, you're going to have people selling marijuana, I'm sorry, cannabis, where then you also have had for many years folks selling it anyway, but they're going to be kind of like unable to get into the legal game because of the stipulations. So yeah, it makes some sense. I appreciate that.
And the senator's big thing is the one thing that we don't want to create are Caucasian cannabis clubs, because that runs completely against what we've been trying to do since 2005. I mean, we want to make sure that people who deserve these licenses, people who've been affected by the war on drugs, people who've been discriminated against, get entry into this new industry, because it's only going to be new once.
Is the fee schedule prepared yet?
No.
Okay. All right. So take this back to the senator. Tell him that it needs to be affordable also, because what if that person doesn't get a grant and they still 100%. Want to be one of the 6 classes, right?
100%. I mean, his whole goal is to try to make it as affordable as possible. I mean, ideally, we don't want it to cost as much as a medical license, which is, healthily into the 6 figures. We want it to be as affordable as possible, for sure.
Okay. Thank you. So the mayor is in the waiting room. We're going to allow him to come in and introduce himself. And then I'm going to transition and ask some questions to the chief and the mayor. And Harris, I do have a couple of extra questions for you, so stay with us.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor. Thank you for joining us. I know you're busy.
I was having a little technical difficulty here. I'm at home and I'm using one of the kids' computers and it doesn't quite work as well as the same as mine. So
you know how I feel at the council meetings now.
Huh?
You know how I feel at the council meetings.
Yeah. That's why I was logging at the office.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining.
I came in on the tail end of Harris's information, his speech there, so I probably missed a lot. So
don't worry, it's going to be still available on YouTube. But most importantly, you are here, right? Because we have some questions for you and the chief, right? We're going to I'll just throw a question at you, and don't laugh. Have you ever smoked marijuana?
I smoked, but I didn't inhale.
Stop it. Whose answer is that? Bill Clinton's, right?
Who's that? Mayor, did you do it with President Clinton? Did you do it with President Clinton? I mean,
no, when I was a teenager, there was a lot of things being offered out here. And I'm just thankful that I broke away from the young people who were doing it at an early age, and I didn't get caught up into that life. I always viewed it as a gateway drug, and many of my friends who started out with marijuana wound up using other type of drugs. So I was never a big fan of marijuana or any other drug for that matter.
All right. Well, that's interesting. We'll talk about that probably the first week in January, the whole gateway thing and all like that. We'll have health professionals. So thank you for that that comment. So let me just get into it with you. Let me ask you a question. From the perspective of our mayor, the city of Linden passed a zoning ordinance prohibiting all retail establishments selling marijuana. So the legislation nullifies all ordinances and gives the municipalities 180 days to act, or, and this is a quote, wholesale and distribution will be permitted in all industrial zones 5 years. The bill will also allow retailers to have conditional use in commercial zones. What would you like to see happen here in Linden?
Well, I think the only areas that we will allow it to be sold is in those in commercial zones. I think that will be along the US 1 corridor, according to what I understand at this point. And quite honestly, if it's going to be legalized and if it's going to be allowed to be purchased, I'd like to see it stay right there, because I don't want to see it in town. I don't want to see it near schools. I don't want to see it near, because unfortunately, you're going to have people who are going to gain access to the drug who don't need to gain access to it. You're going to have children, I think, young people who are unfortunately not responsible will be involved with this, and it's going to be a problem. It really will be a problem.
Okay. So speaking of the problems, Chief, let me ask you a question with regards to the legalization. Oops, I'm on the wrong screen. Over the years, the Linden Police Department has embraced training and community-oriented policing. In the coming months, with the legalization of weed, are you, as the chief, planning any community outreach specific to legalize cannabis?
Thank you for the question, Councilwoman. Yes, we would. As you're well aware, community policing is paramount in my agenda here as the chief. We would do outreach. We would do via social media, pamphlets, any community invitations we get to go out and speak to groups. This would be definitely a priority. I know there's a lot of hypotheticals now where this law is going. We know it's passed. The question is how it's going to be worded. From a police standpoint, not from a political or a business standpoint, the law is going to change what's chargeable, not chargeable, amounts, weights, ages, and there's going to be a whole slew of guidelines that haven't even been addressed yet. That'll come out from the Attorney General guidelines and mandates to prosecutors' offices within the state and then down to the local police departments. So when we get some guidance from the AG's office, as this moves forward to January, February, and March, we'll definitely make every attempt to educate the community through social media, through group talks, pamphlets, and any other mediums we can use to educate about the new marijuana laws in our state.
Yeah, that's going to be tricky. I have a question with regards to the laws. I mean, it's not, huh?
I'm dead, Councilman. I can listen.
I didn't hear you, Chief.
Go ahead. I'm listening for you. Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Okay. If you could, we were talking about the laws. Can you briefly just explain the current levels of penalties? What the penalties are currently in the hierarchy for the possession of cannabis, hashish, and mushrooms?
Well, most of the charges, I know, with the initial basis behind this bill was to decriminalize or legalize minor amounts of marijuana. Most of our encounters that the police have with the public, with the rest, are under 50 grams of marijuana. If somebody has it on their person, if they're stopped on the street in a motor vehicle, it's under 50 grams. Under 50 grams right currently is a disorderly person's offense. If someone's caught with a large amount of marijuana, crude cannabis or crude bricks of marijuana, it's based on weight. Now that goes into multiple other categories. The more crude marijuana you have, bricks or a product, it graduates up based on weight. It could be a fourth, third, second degree crime based on a high volume of actual raw marijuana. Of course, if you have a large amount of product, that could be distribution. This goes out on all different avenues. The distribution charge, the weight will decide on whether it was a fourth, third, second. It graduates up on the severity of the actual charge. Is it near a school zone? Is it near a park zone? But most of our encounters are with the public, and the basis for the bill is minor possession of marijuana. So right now, anything under 50 grams, which is a minor possession, size of a quarter is roughly 1 gram. A couple, you need 50 nickel dime bags, roughly 50 grams. So anything under that is a disorderly person's offense. So that's most of our encounters we have right now, police, with our citizens in our communities. Of course, mushrooms, I'll be very honest with you, mushrooms has been brought up on over a couple of weeks. We haven't seen mushrooms here. I even talked to our narcotics commanders in probably 2 or 3 years. It's not a common drug that you see that often. The charge for mushrooms, it's a Schedule 3. So mushrooms is caught, which is the third degree. Excuse me, the Schedule 1 is a third degree charge. So it is a more graduated. It is an indictable, or what you call a felony, but it's really indictable crime in the state of New Jersey. Schedule 1, it is a third degree crime for mushrooms. But again, it's not that prevalent. We don't see it that much in our state.
Yeah, because I was surprised to see it even made it into the legislation. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, because I don't know. This is not the same like we use at work, do our meetings. But I got a question.
Fancier.
How in the world did we even get this? This thing went from a marijuana legislation to now we have mushrooms. And again, I'll go back to my initial response is that it's a gateway. And it seems like the gate is open, and now all of a sudden, even though it was a small crack in the gate, it seems like mushrooms have already slipped in. And now I want to know what else is going to slip in after mushrooms.
Harris, you have anything for
Yeah,
that?
please. So first off, Mayor, great to see you. Secondly, so the bill itself is exclusively marijuana. There was a time when mushrooms or psilocybin was added into the bill, and we decided that it wasn't the right place for it, so we took it out completely. The two pieces of legislation that are going to be passed and hopefully signed are solely about marijuana. So, Mayor, the gate in terms of that piece of legislation is still closed.
Okay.
There are going to be there is a separate bill in regards to mushrooms or psilocybin, which will for the first offense make it as Chief Hart referred to as a DP or disorderly persons offense, as opposed to a third-degree crime, which is 3 to 5 years for the first time only. This is part of a larger effort that the Senate Democrats and Assembly Democrats are looking into how we can incarcerate people less for possession of small amounts of drugs. Now, that's not saying we want to legalize or stuff like that. We want to make sure that people understand that you do get second chances in society, and we want to illustrate that possessing something doesn't necessarily ruin your life with a 3 to 5 year prison sentence, and that's the vein in which we're looking at it. But I can 100% confirm that in the marijuana pieces of legislation, they are only marijuana. There are no mushrooms, no celery, none of that. I mean, it's simply just cannabis or marijuana.
Okay. May I have a question for you? Thank you, Harris. One really quickly, does the zoning board need the council's authorization to look at zoning areas for the legalized marijuana? Because with the different classes, there's processing, wholesale, distribution, and then there's retail. But does it have to go through the city council first, or does the zoning board, can they take that matter up on their own?
I think anything that goes in front of the planning board will. I don't think the
zoning board. Ultimately,
I think it'll have to go in front of the planning board. I think the zoning board deals with issues such as bulk and like bulk usage, and I'm talking about bulk use of marijuana. I'm talking about bulk and height variances, things in that order. That's the zoning board of adjustment. The planning board will have to come in front of the planning board.
But okay, so it goes to them, and then it comes to the city council for approval and authorization. Because I remember the ordinance for zoning was that there would be no retail establishments in the city at all. That's what we have right now.
Exactly. I mean, you'd have to. I mean, I think council would have to agree to have retail establishments throughout the city before it could even have a chance to get to the front of the planning board.
Okay. So with that, another question for you, Mayor. We were talking at the city council meeting and in great length. We were talking about the budget shortfalls, and so the legislation allows up to 2% tax on retailer, growers, and processors, and it allows 1% on wholesalers. If the city does adopt an ordinance to allow this, where would you like to see the funds go?
Well, if that were to occur, I'd certainly like to see the funds go towards education or something that would be beneficial to our young people. But here lies the problem, and I don't think that they've given a tremendous amount of thought to this, is when marijuana is legalized, it's going to create a host of additional problems. And that is training for our police officers. I mean, who's going to pay to have our police officers trained to make sure they can identify when a person is using marijuana? That's going to cost money. It's going to I don't see where the additional revenues is going to. The ends I don't think are going to justify the means.
All right, wait, but Harris is going to respond. So when you talk about the training, I know there's a stipulation in the bill. Harris, will you want to speak to that for us briefly?
Yeah. So Mayor, you are right in that Rome certainly wasn't built in a day, but in the bill explicitly, we are going to be dedicating revenue from the sale of marijuana to expand police departments' trainings, drug recognition experts, drug detecting canines, as well as other areas in which a police force, whether it be state police, county sheriff's departments, or local police, beef up their enforcement efforts to contend with the legalization of marijuana. So there are training dollars explicitly appropriated in the bill, and that was certainly a priority for Senator Scuteri because Mayor, you're right that Rome wasn't built in a day, but we feel that we're taking a big step to address issues of police training and correction, and we're certainly open. Chief Hart, if you have any thoughts, please reach out to our office. We're certainly open to making sure that training is more robust because you guys are trusted with our cities. You guys are trusted with our safety, and that's not a light thing.
Right. I agree. I did see that they're going to, pay and reimburse municipalities and counties for the drug recognition experts. So that's awesome. But Chief, let me ask you a question. As far as the training goes, I know we are well trained in Linden, and I love the fact that our department goes, above and beyond for training. So if you want to talk to the training aspect, feel free. But I wanted to also ask another question about if there's a test now or one that is being created that will actually measure someone's level of intoxication, if they've used cannabis.
Thank you for that question. I want to get back to segue into what Harris and yourself were talking about, back to DREs first. DREs are very expansive and involved training classes given by the New Jersey State Police. Currently, our department, which is a 140-man department, only has 2 certified DREs in the whole department.
Okay.
The state doesn't offer, quite frankly, enough classes. Maybe with this funding moving forward, they'll be opening more classes and getting more departments statewide involved in this training. So we're behind the 8 ball right from the beginning with having only 2 officers in our department training.
Okay.
That being said, the county, under the guise of the Union County Police in our county here, through the state grant program, we will be participating with an on-call DRE system, on-call list for the county starting sometime early in 2021.
Okay.
Our 2 officers will be this pool of DREs for the county, and it hasn't been rolled out yet, but the initial paperwork came in this week, which I'm signing off on, that we will be participating with that. That being said, there is no outright test. I mean, if you bring somebody in for, let's say it's not alcohol involved, it may be a pill, it may be a pill ingestion, or it could be a marijuana, intoxication of marijuana. There's no real crystal ball to say this is Xanax, this is some type of other pill, this is marijuana. That's why the DRE comes into play here.
Okay.
And they're really involved. Whether the jury's still out, whether they're going to be getting warrants for urine, getting warrants for blood. I know that the THC stays in your bloodstream, could be for days or weeks. There's a lot of unknown variables and really uncharted waters right now. But the DRE is our first line of defense, and the jury's still out on a lot of this yet. There's a lot of hypothetical.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Harris, let me ask you a question. I know that November 19th, the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee met, and they had, left, but there were some amendments that needed to be addressed. Can you speak to those amendments briefly so that everybody understands that, the legislature has been working, to make changes, like you said, the mushrooms were taken out and all like that?
Yeah. So since November 19th, there have been another set of amendments that were adopted by the Senate Judiciary Committee on Monday. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, but the amendments are a few things, and a couple of them are big. One of them is the employment language. So what our employment language hopes to do, and I believe it does very well, is it creates employees and employers' rights now that we have now that we will legalize a once illegal substance. That's the first major change. The second major change is the division of money. So the Speaker, as well as Senator Scuteri, as well as other members of legislative leadership, have sought to incorporate a social equity excise fee. So on top of the sales tax, what we're looking to do is we're looking to take a portion of the funds, hopefully a small portion of money that goes directly to social justice and social equity causes, whether that be prisoner reentry, whether that be educational services, job placement services, and we're hoping to help fund and beef those programs up with the sale of legal marijuana. And with the more legal sale, the more everything that goes around. Those are the two major points in the amendments. And a lot of the other stuff was like you said, Councilwoman, removing mushrooms, a lot of technical fixes. Another big thing is reinforcing the decriminalization language that we're also passing, because on top of legalizing something, there is a huge population of people that have been affected by marijuana. Huge. And we're looking to make people's records more easily expunged. We're looking to dismiss pending charges and things of that nature, because if we're legalizing something, the senator, as well as all legislators that have been involved in the process, believe that we shouldn't be punishing people because of a decision that they made on November 4th.
Right.
Harris, if I may, and that's a very critical point as far as decriminalization is concerned, and people who've got caught with a nickel bag 20 years ago.
Sure.
There's legislation in the books as we speak that if you were caught with a nickel bag of marijuana, you can't get a job as a janitor in the school system.
You're 100% right, Mayor.
And that may have happened when you were 18, 19 years old. You could be 40 now. And have a family and be a very productive person in our society, and you're being punished for having a nickel bag 20 years ago. Now, here's the real problem, and I say this: we all know what happened when it came to to gambling. Okay, now I'm a child of the '60s, and I remember when numbers were a big thing in our community. You had your local bookie. You could bet on a sports game. You could play a number. The bookie would come to he would come to your house and ask you if you want to play a number, or you would find him and say, "I want to play 734." I'll use an old address of mine, and I want to put. You could put a nickel on a number, put a dime on a number. The sad and unfortunate thing was, the people who were the bookies in our neighborhood, they were using this. It was like a job for them. They were raising their families. Some of them had homes here in town. Some of them had several properties in town as a result of them being able to be number runners. They really weren't any type of big time racketeers. They weren't engaged in racketeering or anything like that. But they wound up in jail. They wound up with records, and they could never. And once you wind up in jail, your life is totally disrupted, and nobody will ever hire you again. And only.
If I can just interject really quickly, the state has done block the box. And also, when I was on the personnel committee, once we had to block the box, it was literally legit up to the hiring manager. I understand what you're saying, but it's really up to the hiring manager, because if that offense does not touch upon the job, then it's irrelevant. You know what I'm saying? I know what you're saying.
I know, but I'm just, to my point, I'm just trying to say that these men wound up in jail. Their lives were totally disrupted. They could never really get a good job anymore, just because Mrs. Johnson decided that she wanted to play a nickel on 734, and they got caught with a slip in their pockets as they and labeled as number runners. And unfortunately, they never got their lives back together. And it's sad, but that's just the reality of what happened. And once the numbers were gone. Many of these young, and I'll say it, African-American males who were engaged in the number business were out of work, and then the drugs came into our communities, and then once drugs got here, it was over. I mean, because it wasn't just marijuana; it was any and everything that was pouring into these communities. And my big fear again is that we open this gate and we allow drugs in, and it's going to be all kinds of drugs. And again, if you sell heroin, yes, I put him in jail. You know what I mean? And I just wonder what's going to happen to these individuals who have these offenses, whose lives have been disrupted permanently.
Yeah, the decriminalization legislation. That's a separate matter, and that they're working on that as well.
They have to go together. They have to go together.
Well, they should have gone together. I agree 100%. They should have gone together. That's why I was opposed to this. I'm going to get to you, Harris. But let me just ask, because the mayor made some really good points here. Let me ask you a question, Chief. Let's say, for example, hypothetically, there was someone who, lived in our community and they were enjoying their recreational marijuana, let's say in their backyard, and someone made a call and complained. Is that something like, I know the police will respond to, the calls, but I'm just trying to, like the mayor said, he had a slip in his pocket. If this person has a joint or, it's legal now, what then would they have to, be afraid of, if anything?
Are you talking once this bill is finalized or current status where we are now?
Well, once it's final, not now, because we know it's illegal now. But once it's finalized and, that speaks to a whole nother issue. But, what would they, after January 1st, and now I'll ask you, Harris,
yeah,
after the date of implementation, what would one have to look forward to?
So, to touch on the mayor's original point, I mean, he's 100% right. People's lives were ruined, and I mean, on top of efforts like ban the box, I mean, there are. This bill, the decriminalization bill, goes to great lengths to expunge people's records.
Okay.
So it does give people a second chance, or it goes as far as we can. I mean, we go to great efforts to expunge people's records to ensure that people no longer have to do that for a simple marijuana offense. That's the first point, and the second point is. The decriminalization will decriminalize up to 6 ounces of marijuana, which is yes, it's a lot of marijuana, but most people who use it for personal use have less than an ounce, like Chief Hart said, about 50 grams. Mm-hmm. But if you have a joint in your smoking it in your backyard. I mean, there is a possible ticket that could be written for, pollution or something like that.
Well, that's why I wanted the chief to answer that part of the question for me.
But I mean, we're looking to decriminalize up to 6 ounces of possession to ensure that people who are trying to, use cannabis or use marijuana recreationally don't get put in the position that the mayor outlined.
Right, Chief.
We certainly don't have the date yet. January 1st is a hypothetical date, because I think the thing's going to be rolled back even a lot beyond this till all these details are worked out. I mean, if the recreational marijuana is legalized, officers get sent to a backyard. I think it's really a case by case. It's really a hypothetical. You have to look at really how much is on their person. What is the age of these people? I don't know if the age has still been 21. It was the age that was floating around. That's correct, Harris?
It's still 21. It's still 21, Chief.
Yeah. You have to look at the age of the people involved, what the real amount is, and it's really a case-by-case basis. But I think simple possession, where most of these are going to be in people's private property, I thought these are going to be, you're going to respond and realize there's no offense taking place here, and probably that'll be the end of it. Of course, if you have minors imbibing, or you have large quantities, that goes into a whole other discussion right now.
Okay.
Harris, I got a question for you. When marijuana does become legal, and I think we're heading in that direction, I'm understanding that if I decided that I wanted to grow my own plant, I can't grow my own plant.
Yeah, that is correct. Home grow in the current model is not legal. I mean, at the moment, the thought process was that it would be too much to implement too soon. Now, Senator Scuteri has said multiple times that he's open to expanding legalization to home grow. I mean, right now, I believe up to 10 plants right now is disorderly persons charge. But right now, Mayor, you're right. Home grow remains illegal. But I know the senator has said multiple times that he's open to looking at legalizing home grow.
The other thing, Harris, is that once these locations are set up where you can purchase marijuana, what's to stop a person from going to a location, buying some marijuana and having it in a legitimate state stamped bag, and then all of a sudden going to the guy on the street corner and buying marijuana from a guy on the street and putting it in that bag? How would you know whether or not he had legal marijuana or illegal marijuana? What would be the way you would determine that?
So, I mean,
can I interject really quickly here?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sure.
No, that's a legit question, and it's funny because it actually is in the bill. There's language in there for that. The difference is going to be the quality. So if somebody's really legit getting the quality product, as they call it, then they would probably be less likely to seek it out on a street corner. And Harris can explain or piggyback on. There's going to be, they're actually going to try and minimize what they call black market selling of this. So,
Harris, with the taxes that are involved at the state level, I mean, there are taxes. I mean, how are you going to compete with the guy in the corner who wants to sell a nickel bag? How do you compete with those prices?
So
make them legal, legit businessmen.
So I mean, what Councilwoman Cosby's saying is kind of correct. I mean, but right now the approach is a supply and demand approach. If there's a lot of available marijuana, prices are lower. Right now, what we're facing is the opposite, where there isn't much, and a lot of people want it. So one of the benefits of the legislation is we're going to dramatically increase the amount that's being cultivated, the amount that's being processed, which will lower the price dramatically, which the hope is to drive people away from $150 for an ounce when you can get it legally for possibly $225 without risking, possible incarceration. That is the exact goal of the legalization. But Mayor, to your point, there's exact language in the bill, but I mean, it's a totally legitimate question.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have one more question for you, Harris. I don't know if you know or not, because I don't think I don't know if I had asked the question earlier, but anyway, so with all of these businesses, and you're going to have all of the different licenses, class 1 to 6, has the legislature considered allowing for permits to carry firearms if they're in the course of their business?
So, I mean, that will be a personal corporate decision. I mean, in a lot of pawn shops, in a lot of banks and jewelry stores, there can be an armed guard present. And that's going to be a corporate decision. But I mean, it is not mandating that. But it does allow for security companies to come in or a dispensary to hire a security guard that happens to have a license to conceal and carry. But I mean, of course, they would be subject to everybody whose right it is to conceal and carry. I mean, they're
we
not.
don't really have that right in New Jersey, but I got you.
But I mean, we're allowing for security companies to come in. I mean, but they're subject to the same laws that everybody else are.
No, I got you.
It's a personal corporate decision.
Okay. Chief, do you have any final words for us? Anything that you want to just give us a heads up on, look out for with regard to this matter?
I just want add to one thing I think Harris put up. It's less than 10 plants is actually a third-degree crime. Growing marijuana at home with your private plants, 10 or less is 9. Actually, it's 9. 10 or less than 10 is a third-degree crime. I just want to say the police department's ready to, regardless of what people's personal opinion or the State Chiefs Association has an opinion on this also, and you can argue to the cows come home on all different angles on legalizing this. We will adapt. We will train our officers whatever this law is finally implemented. As per the Attorney General guidelines, we get our direction from the Attorney General's office to the prosecutor's offices. It's going to be a cultural change for a lot of our officers. Some of the parts of the bill I do agree with, some I don't, but my opinion really is irrelevant. I respond to my directives from the Attorney General and the County Prosecutor. The officers will be well trained when this laws are finalized and enacted, and we are ready and willing to move forward with this in whatever form it comes. I also want to thank you for allowing me on the forum tonight, with the mayor and me with Harris and yourself. Hopefully we got a little bit of a discussion going here, and we can talk for hours and hours on this in all different angles, but it was a good opening discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for being here. Mayor, do you have anything that you want to just, say and alert our community on with regard to your position on how we're going to move forward on this?
I will say this. We had a lot of discussion early on about marijuana and its legalization. And I think we have a lot more discussion to go about marijuana and its legalization. And I can assure everyone that I will do my due diligence and do my homework on this topic, so that if it does come to fruition, the legalization, that those who are deserving of the rewards and the profits from this receive some sort of compensation. And I'm talking about those, well, I should say those who are going to be affected by this the most receive some sort of compensation for it, such as our school children and people who have addiction problems, etc. You'd like to see some money wind up and channel in those directions to try to help and prevent further decay in our society.
I agree. Harris, do we or do we not have a firm date on when this is going to be implemented?
So the implementation is going to be done in phases, because it has to be. What Chief Hart said, the Attorney General, once this is legal, the Attorney General is going to come up with new guidelines, because he has to, because they're automatically out of date. People's records will be expungible January 1 if this passes.
If it passes tomorrow?
If it passes tomorrow.
Okay, so tomorrow is the day that we all need to tune into legislative meetings, right?
Yeah, so tomorrow both the Assembly and the Senate are going to be voting on the decriminalization measure and the legalization measures. That's when, if they get enough votes, that's when it goes to the governor's desk and the governor has to make a decision. But in terms of regulations, in terms of guidelines, that it's going to have to be phased in. It's because, the one thing that we want to avoid is just dropping a whole mess onto community police forces, because what that would do is that would cause pandemonium. And we do want to avoid that. And anything that Chief Hart or the mayor or you, Councilwoman, or anybody in Linden, anything that we can do to make the industry better, we're here to serve all of you. So, if there are any constructive points, please reach out to us. We've led on this issue and we want to continue to.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very, very much. I want to just, this is our community meeting, and I'm glad that, I was able to do them online. So I don't know how many people have tuned in live. However, it's going to be available for folks to view later. And I want to ask you guys to please be safe. I know the mayor and the chief, you guys are out there, making sure that our city's going to be clean, safe, and all like that. So thank you for what you're doing, and be safe. Right?
All right. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
So,
Good night.
All right. Stay with us, because I want some closing comments, folks. All right. So there we have, we got off to like a semi-late start, but I want to thank you guys. Usually the community meeting lasts for about an hour to an hour and a half. And there was some good information there. You know, tomorrow is the most important day for this legalization and decriminalization matter. Get the information. You can go on to the state legislature. The meetings generally stream live, and you can go there and you can get the information, see our legislative body at work. If everything is effective January 1st, the legalization will be implemented in phases. What I want to say for all of you budding entrepreneurs, stay tuned to this. Get into the information, because in the bill, there are accommodations for minorities, for women, and for disabled veterans to have those opportunities to get into this. And Harris, I couldn't have said it better myself. He said he does not want it to be a Caucasian cannabis club, nor do I. So if you have an interest in any sort of business opportunity, then, you know, get into the legislative information, look it over. It's not that hard. If you don't want to be a grower, you don't want to be a processor, you might want to be a retailer. You might want to be a deliverer. There are a lot of job opportunities here. And I'm just looking forward to, you know, the members of the impact zone communities and members who, you know, might want to just do some entrepreneurial things, you know, and that's good. But I want to also just say really quickly, be clear, young people. If those of you who are out here and you may watch this video, I want you to be clear. Marijuana is not legal right now. In the bill, I've read clearly that it says once this passes, right, you need to know any occupant of a motor vehicle located on a public highway or the right-of-way of a public highway shall be prohibited from possessing any open or unsealed alcoholic beverages. We all know that you can't drive around with open alcohol, but it also is going to include unsealed cannabis items, so that are intended to be consumed by means of smoking, vaping, or aerosoling. There are some exceptions, like if you're on a party bus or in a limousine, but be clear, if you have, let's say, an open container, if it's stored in the trunk of your car, then you're okay. But if you have it in the car and it's open, then, you know, you're subject to a charge at the end of the day. And this is after it becomes completely legal. And that's no different than having an open container of alcohol. All right. So just be clear and be guided accordingly. Be safe when, you know, once this goes in. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Tonight is December the 16th. And, I still like to do my community meetings. I just miss the personal connections with you guys. And I kind of miss the snacks, too. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the page, because I'm going to start doing weekly updates, because this is an important matter. And be careful out there if you need to go out. The governor, like I said in the beginning, has declared a state of emergency. But if you're going to be home, tune into these committee meetings. The Assembly and the Senate will meet tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good night.